the whole point of doing this was just
test run.
Well, no, the whole point of setting up the show was the idea that I'm not a natural conversationalist, and I want to try and push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit. So
I think in an opposite sense, you're actually a good conversationalist. So it's a good thing to be going into, because I don't know about you, but like the people you involve yourself with, myself and others, like we get into deep rabbit holes about things. So that's a good place to be like, maybe I should just...
We shoot off down some wormholes on things, and
definitely, the tangents go crazy off.
On holiday last year, sitting there in thunderstorms, putting the world to rights. It's
reminiscing of those Bali days.
But I appreciate you coming on.
Nope, thanks for having me.
First experience. The first recording of the Jack Davies podcast.
Make a note of this, right? When this reaches hundreds of thousands of subscribers, remember this episode.
The day Jordan McCann was on. So, Jordan McCann, friend, coach.
Yep.
Amateur athlete.
Average. What did we class it as, or what did you stamp it, Mark, as? Elitely average?
Elitely average. Elitely average. You're certainly outperforming me. So, and considering what I know, and people will come to know about you now, the way you have to balance things in your life, I'd say you're outperforming the time that you actually have to do it. So, you'd be pretty happy with that.
Thank you. I mean, it's one of those things. I think you always consider that you could be doing it in better ways, and there is obviously people that do the same thing and 10 times better or harder.
Yeah.
But
there's other factors that go into that, and you know how much time you can commit to it.
Yep.
You know how much effort has to go into it, and you know that you have to balance that with recovery and with life as well. So
there's a few factors to be juggling, that's for certain.
Known you for like 4 years or so now.
It's been 4 years.
Yeah, and know each other pretty well. Travelled together last year.
Yep.
To Bali.
It's definitely been a progressively developed friendship, hasn't it? Like we've definitely gone through good stages, and it continues to evolve.
And it's nice to be getting to that point where I've chosen somebody who makes me feel quite comfortable to come on and help me do the first one. So thank you very much.
And I feel ease as well. Like you said, I think this will be, and it's the way that we are. We're quite natural. We are quite natural in how we communicate, how we talk about things, the point of views that we have, visions. It's all quite similar. So it makes everything easier and flows no matter what we sort of end up talking about, I think, half the time.
Can I just check? Can you hear me through your headphones?
I can hear you, yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep.
So, tell us a bit about yourself from, where you started, what you do for a job, and how you balance that with your elite athlete career.
Elitely average career. Okay, so I'll start with the basis of sort of what I'm currently doing, and then I can gauge back to potentially how it's led to this point. So, electrical communications engineer, which is a basic way of describing it. And I do that for a company, and I do shift work with it. So I usually work like early shifts, late shifts, which is something like a 3 till 11 shift. Night shifts, rolls through the night, so like 11 till 7s. We then do 12 hours on the weekends, which can be nights as well. So that's 7 till 7s, and then 7 till 7s on day shifts as well. And then luckily I do get a little period of like rest periods because of the hours we accumulate. So that's the current working pattern that I sort of work with. And then on the side of that, I do coaching obviously at CSU. Do that like on Sundays and Mondays if I can. And then in between all of those little gaps I have, I do my training.
Try and squeeze your own training in.
Try and squeeze my own training in. So that's kind of the current here and now, alongside doing like some programming and PT stuff as well. Again, merely just to give back to people as well, which probably comes back to then flowing it all back to where I sort of maybe started. So from a young age, I think, I think we spoke about this before, and there's certain characteristics that you sometimes have that you don't really understand why you have them. They're sometimes just ingrained. So although my mum and dad were really good at encouraging me to do things, it took me to take the first step. And I always remember that. So I remember like being younger and all my friends were playing football at the time. Although football's been involved in my family and everything, it wasn't something my dad was hugely interested in. So he just kind of let me go around through phases as I was as a younger kid. And then it took me to go like, oh, like all my friends are doing football. Like,
so
can I go?
That?
Yeah. So I was like, I want to go and play football. Wasn't necessarily like it was just, I watched it all the time and it was something I was doing. It was just my friends were doing it. So I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that. So I went and did it. And then an interesting point of view from that as well was I remember starting with my football, and this was back when it was still like, was it 7-a-sides?
7-a-sides.
7-a-sides, that's the one.
What, 12, younger?
Younger, maybe. I feel like maybe around about, it was before, obviously 11s. 11 is when you do the 11-a-side stuff. So right, maybe like under 9, maybe when I started. So a couple of years of that. And I remember at that point, so I started, when you had you had 2 teams at the time for 7-a-sides. Yep. You had an A and a B team.
B team.
Yep, I was the sub for the B team.
Okay.
So that was me originally. And there's a few things on that. So I remember my dad used to work away a lot with what he does as a career. And again, I'll come on to probably him a little bit later on anyway. But my dad used to work away a lot when I was growing up. So he wasn't always around for like seeing some of the things I used to get up to. And I remember one of the changing points was I was playing a football game. I was a sub for the B team. My dad would turn up. It was the first time he turned up. We was playing a tough team. It was pissing with rain. And I remember being like, oh, hopefully I'll get on in a minute. Hopefully I'll get on in a minute. Hopefully I'll get on in a minute. And it went on and on and on. And I remember it was like, the game was tight, maybe less than 5 minutes to go. And I was like, shit, I'm not getting on here. I just wasn't the ability and quality that everyone else was.
The gaffer didn't put you in.
The gaffer didn't put me in. And that's one of those little kind of things that you sort of, from a young age, you don't realise it, but it holds on to you.
Yeah, you remember it now.
You remember it. That was like a little turning point. And I think I went home. There's like 2 times when I was younger that I ever cried, because it's not something I usually do. And I went home and I cried because I was just like, I just felt like shit. I just felt unworthy, as you probably would.
Had you not played games before that?
Yeah, a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again.
This because Dad was there.
Dad was there. It was just, it meant something. And Dad was there, and it'd be funny if he could actually remember this. But yeah, and I went home and I cried. And I remember another game, same sort of thing. Sub, felt on, just didn't feel like I had an impact on anything. And I just went home and I just cried to my mum. I was just like, I'm just not, why is no one wanting me to be a part of this? And I think that was the first sort of point when it just kind of went into my head, like, oh, if you want to be a part of this, you've got to work for it.
Right.
And that was, no one was telling me that at that time. That was just a frame of mind.
So we're still talking less than 10 years old.
Yeah, less than 10 years old.
Having quite a defining moment.
Yeah, just being like, wow, like
putting in the work.
Yeah, this isn't going to give in to you. So that was that. So I continued with the football throughout the years, and funny enough, as that develops, and as you know, with a side hustle too being putting in the work, is it just progressively increased. So, I went from being that player to being the best player on that team, being the captain of that team, and then being a bit like, oh, I feel like my quality is better than this now.
So you was putting in work around the scheduled training?
No, I don't think, no, not really. Oh, well, yes, to a degree. So whilst that was still going on, my ideas of furthering out my adventures progressed. And I think my mum and dad realised like, oh, it's good for him to be involved in a lot more things. So that's when they pushed me into doing swimming. Okay. So I started doing swimming at the time. And then I also got involved in kickboxing. Obviously, you don't really know things. And looking back now as a coach, I can see the degree of how those little additions would have benefited as a full circle.
Carryover.
Massive carryovers.
Carryover.
Yeah. So
I remember reading once that Michael Owen's dad, he was the smallest striker in the team.
Yep.
I think it was at Lillishall when he was in the academy.
Yep.
And so his dad put him into boxing training because he
Yes.
was getting shoved off the ball.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're doing kickboxing and you think swimmers, it's non-contact, but
it was almost like, understanding then, like you didn't realise, but like the swimming was building a good level of recovery and stronger fitness base, being able to endure a little bit more. The kickboxing was 100% building that strength, that confidence, because it was a bit like, well, if you're getting punched during kickboxing, going onto a football pitch and taking a few shoulders and elbows is nothing. Yeah, so you're like, this is fine. So they were obviously assisting, and then, just as more of my interest was in the football at the time. And I think it was, although I was actually better at the other 2 sports.
Okay.
I think it was just, as everyone, kids
that's
usually
where your passion was. That's where your friends were playing.
Friends were there, seeing other people. And I remember that, so that just progressively improved and was like, captain of that team. And again, there was like a mindset approach that wasn't forced upon me, but I just got to that point of being in that team and I went, I think I'm better than this. And it took me to go, I'm going to go look somewhere else now. And I remember having to turn up to my team being the captain of that team, speaking to my manager at the time, who was a great guy, and just being like, look, I'm sorry, I think I'm going to leave.
Got to explore something else.
I think I want to go somewhere else. There's a little bit of a project through friends that I know from school that they're looking to try and progress further with a manager called Ian Canetta, who we know from Sisu, which Familiar. Is another important person, to be fair, in my life. So I knew what he was trying to do. I'd already had a few people approaching me saying like, yeah, mate, you should come along. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So then that's what I did. Left the team, joined Ian's team at the time, and he took an approach where he was trying to, for himself, become better, I guess, as a manager. So he started scouting out, looking for different kids to bring in and make his own new team. And this was obviously quite a bold decision even for him at the time, because he had a group of kids that he'd grown up coaching them. Yep.
He had some hard decisions.
He had a massive decision to make.
With kids to make, yeah.
Yeah, so these are kids that he's... Kids. Yeah, like you think now, even as an adult, like you go, that's a hard call to make. It's quite brutal, you know, even if you was thinking on a parent standpoint as well. Like, this is a guy that had coached a few kids from the age of maybe 8 or 9 as well, getting to like the age of maybe 14 and being like, sorry, I'm going to have to let you all go.
Going off to play district football.
Yeah, Kent League, we're going to push it. And he brought us all in. And then I think that was the first moment that I really became, even though I had my friends and I was really close to my friends and we were all the same sort of personality, that was the first time I came a part of a collective team. And I was like, you can see the benefits, the huge positives it takes being involved in a team where your comrades, you're like your brothers almost, but you just knew everything about each player. And there was like, Ian did an amazing job of doing this. He was almost a little, I think, ahead of his time in that area of leagues, to be able to pick people and go like, I think he should be here, I think he should do this. And he made a team rather than it just being a collective of...
Taking 14-year-olds and teaching them to function as a team is more than the average football coach at that age who are teaching football players, not...
Yeah, and almost like the players choosing where they wanted to play. Because you grew up with idols. You probably looked at... Everyone had probably their own different idols and thought, I want to be like him and I want to be like that. I know for me, it was like, I wanted to be right wing, number 7, David Beckham.
David Beckham, yeah.
Yeah, that was me. And that was my specialty.
Nobody grows up to want to be Dennis Irwin, do they?
Not really. No. Although now you appreciate someone like Dennis Irwin, you go, mate, that guy was sort of what built a solid foundation for someone like Man United. But yeah, that was that. And that's what I kind of remember being, even in my training sessions, like that was the thing I always wanted to work on, was just like, can I whip that ball? Can I find that person, find that pass? So I realised, like, funny enough, I didn't have the energy to be a right winger. So I kind of went centre mid because I liked that ability to read the game, pick a pass, and then dictate the game a little bit. But funny enough, which is interesting to know, like my fitness wasn't good enough to play that role realistically. Okay. I wasn't good at getting up and down the pitch. Obviously, games evolved now. This is way, a few years. You're talking about 15 odd years ago. Yeah. So now running. It's more like you probably could get away with the way I wanted to play.
Yeah, they work the ball differently.
Yeah, it's all different. But this was a lot of an energy game. So it was Ian that at that time was just like, now, do you know what? You've got a few qualities that I think you'll be better as like even just a centre-back, because you command, so you talk from the back and you like to read a game. Like you seem to see it a bit better.
Spotted your leadership and your strategic brain.
Yeah, I think so. And again, everything's always interesting because it does come full circle. I didn't realise it at the time whilst I was doing that. However, looking back on it now, I understand, because when I did my kickboxing, as I progressed to that, I got to the black belt of that. And part of my black belt, I can't remember what you call it. Grading. That's it. The grading is you had to do levels of leadership roles. So there was things where I had to run some classes, again, it all goes back in circles. I learned how to do you had to do endurance events, you had to do some sort of charity work, all of these different things. And in part of the leadership role was like the old sensei gave us little booklets. And in those booklets, there was always different categories to them. So like one booklet would be like motivation. So what is your motivation? What drives your motivation? How are you going to stay motivated? And you had to bit of homework. You had to write in that book and build a catalogue of different bits. So there was like motivation, discipline, I feel like hard work was involved in it, and you had to demonstrate like those roles. So I think that's what developed my leadership role.
Yeah.
Almost.
So it sounds like from a young age, your football coach identified you have a strategic brain, and you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you have a deep thinking brain. You have a leadership, and that is reflected in your coaching today.
Yep.
So how do you get from young lad playing football to coaching? Because it wasn't an instant change, was it?
No, it's a very progressive one. I think it was a few factors played into part. So my way of thinking was I have my career, have my job, but I've always had that thing in the back of my head was like, well, what happens if that goes wrong? Again, this might be my strategic brain. So I was like, what happens if this goes wrong? If one day they turned around to me and went, sorry, lads, we haven't got the contracts anymore. You're going to have to go. What am I going to fall back on? So that's where I just addressed, like, what am I good at? And I was like, at that time, I was doing a lot of training because once the football and everything stopped, it fell on my responsibility to keep up with whatever I wanted to do. Otherwise, I was just going to I looked at certain people and I was like, well, that's the path I'm going to go down, being overweight, out of shape, if I just continue on this way. So I was like, right, well, now...
So you're a young teenager, 16, the post-16 dropout?
This would have been 18, 19. Yeah, because I got scouted to go to like the semi-pro sort of stuff. And I started working, funny enough, from the age of 16. So again, this was an influence from my dad.
The first experience of balancing work and
exactly
chasing high-level sport.
Yeah, definitely. So my dad was one of those that said, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to university and push that sort of thing? And I was like, at that point, I didn't really apply myself academically. I didn't feel like I could. Realistically, it was just I didn't put the extra work in behind the scenes. That was all it was.
Wasn't your jam.
It wasn't my jam, which is fine. So I was like, no, I think I need to go into work because I'd rather start earning. So 16, had the apprenticeships, got through that the first time of doing it, got offered like 3 or 4. So I was like, oh, this is good. So I got a few choices. So I took that upon myself. And then so I started work. And then that's when, I realised like, the semi-pro demands was just like, you got to turn up to certain sessions a week. You got to do this. And then I was like...
Are you on shifts at this point?
I was on shifts, but I was having to do like dabbles in nights and everything. And maybe at the time I used it as a bit of an excuse. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do that because I can't do football training on a night shift. Obviously you can now looking back on it. But that started it. And I was just like, okay, that stopped. And then I was like, right, it's upon myself now to take something into my own hands. So that's when I then started training. And I think as I was saying with the career, like I just thought, well, what's going to happen if this ever goes wrong? I was like, what am I doing a lot? What have I always done? And I was like, I've trained. I've always trained. And at that time, not a huge amount of interest, but I'd get the odd people being like, oh, what is it you do? Like, you look like you're in quite good shape.
You're in a commercial gym?
Commercial gyms at the time, just having regular conversations with people. And they're like, oh yeah, like, you look like you're in good shape. You always seem to know what you're doing. Like, do you find giving me some help, some guidance? And I would do that, just take it off my own back and just give them sort of advice and try and help them along their way. So that's why I took the decision. I was like, oh, maybe I should just get myself some qualifications, keep this as a back burner. So if I lost a job just randomly, I've got something I can fall straight back into. I've got a few demands already, had the qualifications in place. I haven't got to worry. Like, that's my backup. So I think that's how that originally started. And then again, going back to being that sort of younger kid, I think where I've used to being coached by football managers, being coached by kickboxing instructors, and then being coached by swimming instructors.
We did an apprenticeship.
Coaching. Being coached. I've just had that in me. So I think it seems easy and natural to take that role of being like, well, I know I can do this because I've got experience in seeing how other people do it. So I'll just merge a little bit of what they do and what I've learned and become my way of delivering it. So that's sort of how that whole process and all the little pieces kind of came together.
You can see how your tactical brain makes you an engineer.
Yes.
You can see how that part of your brain also drives the way you coach.
Yep.
Very high attention to detail.
Yep.
Very precise.
Mm-hmm.
And very certain in the way you want to do things.
Yeah.
I've watched you for several years try things on the whiteboard, rub it out.
Yeah.
Try again.
Yeah.
Stop things midway. Nope, this isn't working.
Yeah.
And it's very much engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering a program. It's fault finding.
Fault finding, which is pretty much what I do. That is my main focus and role as my job, is fault finding. So 100% that's how my mind applies in a working environment, and then sort of everything else almost.
So your coaching, you fit that around your shift job.
Mm-hmm.
And that is you don't put, it's not a lot of hours, but it's a lot of hours to be doing for a side hustle.
Yeah.
So it must be, you can't be doing it for the money. You've got to be doing it for the passion.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's realistically, the return isn't huge for the hours. If you went hours to investment, it's not a great return realistically. It just gives me that little bit extra that I can enjoy what I'm doing. So it's definitely comes from a passion standpoint. And I guess it's like another side of it is just whether it's ingrained in me. It's just that the process in my head is just like it's just hard work. And like, don't get me wrong, I think sometimes if I wanted to do, I could apply myself better to one thing and be greater at it. But unfortunately, I don't think that's where my cards have been dealt, and I'm okay with that in that way.
Why coaching rather than more of what you do? So, like lots of people will do private work.
Yeah, I think, again, I think this is the thing where it comes into that it wasn't necessarily my decision to go into an apprenticeship and engineering. That was very much driven by my dad. And again, like, you understand now, being older and let's say a little bit wiser, he did that from a very security standpoint.
Traditional sense.
Very traditional, very security standpoint. So you can't ever look back and be like, oh, I can't believe they didn't really ask me what I wanted to do. I totally understand it because, again, from another further backstory, like where I've seen my parents come from, I completely understand why my dad's way of thinking was like, get some security. This is a career for life. You'll have a pension. You'll be secure. You'll have a regular income. That's what you need. So I think that's why I've always seen what I do as just a career. It's not necessarily the passion. It's
what
not,
you want to spend your time doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you coach as a labour of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, realistically, because there's this thing that I always say as well, where it's like, I think for a while I'd invested a lot into the training and everything, and I always say like sometimes I've come too far to come this far.
Okay.
So I feel like if I just stopped everything, well, what's the point in all the hours, the years and everything that you've put into it in the first place? So the ball's rolling, keep it rolling, and it can develop into something maybe at some point in time that you go, oh, I'm glad I just stuck with that, because you never know where it could end up at some point in time. I think with the career side of things, I just let that roll, and I just keep it ticking over, doing what I need to do. But it's definitely like I'm not seeking ambitions in that the way that I'm currently probably setting myself with coaching and training and competitions and things like that. Like when I consider two different frame of mindsets, I'm definitely invested in one, not hugely invested in the other.
Yeah. So, when you come home from work, when you're on the train, when you've got spare time, your brain is going to coaching.
Yeah. It's programming for myself, for others, planning the week ahead, what needs to be worked on, where's a weakness, what needs to be addressed, what's the future plans coming up to be, which, yeah, again, like you said, if I was to invest that into the career side of things, who knows where that could have been. But I think that's one thing I've never necessarily been. Originally, I was driven to maybe do the two things as a financial gain.
Yep.
And then you realise, like, that's not going to be a huge return. The financial return isn't what actually does drive me. It's being around people that I enjoy spending my time with. It's helping people, seeing other people achieve through sometimes your guidance and your help. Like that's a really positive return for me. Whereas I think with what I do career-wise, it's you get a job done, that's a box ticked, you move on. There's no sort of positive.
Does your professional work enrich you at all? Or does the coaching enable you to keep turning up?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I hadn't found something that I was interested in outside of it, I could have potentially been searching my options.
Yeah, but you've got something you can throw your whole self into.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. So that's why I think that I'm just that juggler, because I have got something that I do fully enjoy doing. And like I said, I wouldn't have met the people that I've met if I hadn't made those decisions and be in the position I am now with coaching, training and competing. So for that, I am grateful for it and thankful that it has probably been the right decision that I've made in some ways. Because, I don't think with the career side of things, it's something that I look at long term and be like, oh yeah, I definitely want to be moving into this role or want to be pushing for that. And the only thing I'd ever want to get off to change would be to get off of shift work.
Yeah, okay.
So
open up your time to spend more coaching and working out?
Potentially. Open up a few more windows potentially, but it's more maybe just to be less tired, to be fair, doing shift work, I think. And again, that's probably part and parcel is doing all the other stuff on the side whilst doing shift work.
That does segue me to, how do you find it within yourself week in, week out to balance a regular work week, which is actually an irregular work week because it's different each week depending on your shift pattern. How do you find the time and the energy and the enthusiasm to deliver your coaching to the standard that you deliver it to? And then what we're going to talk about was, the standard that you perform at in your sport. And your sport's CrossFit.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's no mean feat. You have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that you fulfill all your obligations at work, in your coaching, at home, and then still get it done?
See, I think this is when I think it does come down to like a mindset and perspective side of things, because yes, it sounds like a lot to people, and it can be when I say it out loud sometimes. But I think for me, I look at people as my parents, for an example, and I look at what they've achieved and what they've done, especially someone like my dad. My dad's probably one of the hardest working people I know, and I think that's what drives a lot of my willingness to be the hardest worker that I can be, because I've seen where he's come from as a background.
Are you still that little lad on the sub bench for the B team trying
to make him proud? It's probably there. It's probably ingrained in that subconsciousness. Do you know what I mean? And like I said, he worked away a lot. Didn't really understand why at that time, but he was building. If I could give a huge backstory to my dad, I would, because I think what he's got. This is why I think it is, because when I consider what I'm going through, it's technically easy in comparison to what I think someone like my dad's been through, and I think that's where the mindset thing kicks in straight away.
You view all this hard work from a position of perspective,
because I'm like, yes, it might be hard, but I know it's been harder. I know it's been harder for someone like my dad. I know what he's had to go through. I know how he's had to get himself to the level that he's at. So me doing what I'm doing is probably, if not the same or on par as what he's technically done. It's just where he's gone to be to where he is. I've had a little bit better of a starting position. So in my head, I'm like, well, you've got to do that little bit more because of what he's been able to achieve. Surely you've got to get that little bit more to get the same.
I think the people that complain about not having enough time, not having enough energy, their goals and ambitions passing them by, they forget that getting to work towards them, these are the good times.
Yeah.
Like you get to work towards these goals.
Yeah.
You get to have ambitions. And applying a bit of perspective, there's people across even this world today that don't get the opportunity to pursue the things they want. You have a job that you like and you're good at. You have a sport that you enjoy and then get to coach as well.
Yep.
As well as all of the other bits that you fit in socially around that.
Yep.
And still find time to ensure that you're getting the rest, recovery,
and
competing and progressing to the best of your ability.
Yeah, definitely. I think
it's a privilege.
It is a privilege. And it's like, it's like you said, it's 100% perspective, because a lot of things with anything is just like, can you actually manage your time? Are you utilizing your time? Are you
analytical brain?
Yep, analytical brain. Like, it's almost like, are you just being proactive or are you being productive? It's that sort of approach, isn't it? So, is there times in moments where you could be doing other things to maybe work yourself towards something else? Like, again, certain people are different in what they have as availability. I knew for me with being an engineer, like just doing things where I'm commuting around between jobs and stuff, that's when I started that kind of process of going, well, maybe I'll start listening to podcasts, I'll start listening to audiobooks, or if I've got a 45-minute journey here and I'm lucky enough that I don't have to drive it or something, I'll start to write a program out, or I'll start to plan a workout. And that kind of ticks that ball of going, instead of just filling my time needlessly, I'm sort of like filling in something that could actually help me or someone else at some
Using
point.
the time to the best of your advantage. It's the, what you're talking about there is it's not an overused term, but it's definitely a popular term at the moment. It's the growth mindset.
Yeah.
I've got time. I can use this to do something.
Yeah.
I've got a challenge. Good. I didn't want this to be easy.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Every sportsman tends to have that sort of outlook on things. It's whether it's cricket and you're several wickets down, chasing a batting score, or whether it's football and you're in the 90th minute and you're 1-0 down. It's having that. Now's the time that matters, and you're using that additional time you've got to read books, listen to podcasts, do your programming. Do
something that helps you push towards that next thing or that next goal or whatever it might be. And just having that kind of in your head that, you can get there. You just, again, it probably goes back to the thing that we said. You've actually just got to put a little bit extra work into it.
Have you seen the new Arnold documentary?
I have.
You have? You've seen that thing? He says, you need to stay busy.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's almost, again, this might go back to being that kid. So I think even as one of your questions might have been like, how do you keep doing it as well? I think there's a level of discipline ingrained into me that's very military anyway.
Yeah.
It's just the way that as you said.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's seen you on Instagram, seen you in the gym, seen you with your top off will tell you that guy's got discipline.
Yeah, there's got to be an element of it.
You must regularly forego the donut in favour of the sit-up.
Potentially.
Yeah.
We let it slide sometimes. But yeah, it's that definitely that discipline, because I think, that's not something that I've just personally developed. I think that was something that, again, I'll give credit to my mum and dad for, because when I was younger and I started the sport and then they were like, oh yeah, this is good, keep him rolling in it. I remember when I used to do them, there wasn't necessarily a day off. Like it was, you're going to go to this training session, you're going to be doing this, you're going to be doing that. So there'll be days like anyone where I'd be like, oh, I don't really want to do this tonight. And it would be the tough shoulder of, well, tough shit, you're going. And it doesn't matter what you do, you turn up.
Definitely the benefit of team sports as well.
100%. So like, it would be like, and my mum and dad used to say that sometimes. They'd be like, well, if you don't go, you're letting the team down.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, don't. And I hate that feeling of letting people down, clearly, because that's why I'm now involved with coaching. Yeah. So that's always been something in me. And yeah, I think that's where just that little bit.
I think teams can really summon that in people. I'm someone that cannot suffer for myself.
Yeah.
But put me in a team environment and I will not want to be the weak link, whether that's leading my team at work, whether it's throwing down in the CrossFit gym or five-a-side.
Yeah, 100%. And you'll probably appreciate this as well, because you were technically the next line of defence, what I would call it, because you were a goalkeeper, weren't you?
Goalkeeper.
So I think this mindset really...
Also known as I was fat.
Covered up more of the goal. Smart thinking. I think this kind of does go into... It'd be interesting to know if you ever had like the ability to, use psychology to assess people. But when you're in those sort of deeper roles, as you said, like you don't want to let side down. So I remember being like, as that centre back, that would be my first line of thought, was like, if anything goes through me, I let the team down, because there's no one else in between me and the goal now. There's one goalkeeper, but
you guys might think like that. That's not the mindset of a goalie. A goalie is like, I'm on my own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's
the team might not be expecting, you can't save them all, but the mindset of the goalie is they need me to save them all.
Yeah.
And I think the goalie has so much more responsibility than shot stopping.
Yes.
They're the only person that can see the entire field of play.
Yep.
They're the only person that's watching the opponents, because they're not moving for the ball all the time.
Yep.
And I think for me, that was where I first learned leadership.
Yep.
Communication. Ruthlessness.
Yep. Yep. I could 100% understand it, because again, being that person in that sort of position, I completely get it, because I think, and that's where it'll be interesting, because I wonder if you looked at people that did this sort of sport and maybe their mindset and approach, but if you worked further up the pitch, I think you'd find that some of those people are better risk takers. I mean, I've never been a huge risk taker. As you said, I'm probably quite calculated in what I do, but it was, again, going into that mindset of where you are. And if I tried to do something that was a bit out there and I fucked it up, I'd hate that thought of going...
someone's through on goal.
Yeah. And it's the same as you as a goalkeeper, isn't it? You can't really take that risk. It's your...
But you're right. Up the top, there's room for flair. There's room for the audacious shot from outside the 18-yard box.
Yeah, just think, my legs are tired, give it a fucking whack here. Let's just see what happens. Whereas, if your legs are tired and you go, I'm not going to run for that ball, you could be the reason as to why the team drops that goal, that drops that 3 points, that drops you the league. Yeah. It can be as simple as that. Do you know what I mean?
And I guess I learned to shoulder a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
It is a lot of the way I lead teams now.
Yes, because that's what you...
Which is, this
career.
all rests on me.
Yeah. And I think that's where you can take a huge amount of credit to go, like, I did do a lot of character building at that point. You probably didn't realise hugely, but it is portraying on you now. And
you have to say, I'm taking extreme ownership for someone's strong goal. I am the only option here.
Yeah, literally, like, there's nothing that can... The only thing that stops this goal going in is me, unless they make a huge mistake. But, it's not always going to be the way.
So you've got your discipline, you've got your work ethic. There's definitely enjoyment. Yeah. So when enjoyment meets discipline, you tend to start to create a bit of flow.
Yeah.
So what is it that where do you find flow?
Where do I find flow? I think it's actually just, it's like anything, once the ball's rolling. So once I'm in what I'm doing, the flow starts to happen. It's almost like, I can almost, like, as you kind of referred back to this, when I would write something on a whiteboard, rub it out, change it, do this, like, my brain will kind of overwork sometimes before I do something. And then once I start to think, okay, now I know the flow. Like, actually, when I'm doing this, I'm going to change this as I'm sort of doing it, or I'm going to work on doing, like, I'm going to change this rep scheme, or actually this exercise should be thrown in here. And that's when the kind of creativity kicks in, because I think that's what a lot of what programming, training and all that is anyway, and what I enjoy doing, which is that kind of like programming aspect, I guess, now, as I'm getting a bit older with it anyway, is it allows my creativity to flow. To me, that's where I get to allow a bit of freedom.
Right.
So I think that's when my flow comes in, because I'm not a hugely creative person when it comes to my work, but that's my creativity. And I think everyone's got that in them. It's just everyone will find it differently. Some people are like that with music, with art, podcasting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I think creativity is what renews us. It keeps us fresh. It keeps us off of the mundane, and in this culture that glorifies hustle culture, I think people are burning out. And creativity is a chance to free the brain.
100%, yeah.
Be yourself, and that's what like I said, this what the whole podcast experiment is for me.
A
chance to have interesting conversations, understand other people better, short circuit my learning. Because by begging people to come in and sit down with me, and I can ask questions that shamelessly serve me. So I can understand, how do you do it? How can I do it better? And it's a chance for me to challenge myself.
Definitely, yeah.
And creativity, I have a brain like yours. It wants to follow systems. It wants to, my planning for this podcast is very, very, regimented. I have a plan I want to work through.
You got
and actually, what we've done so far is relax,
just let it go off topic, and it just flows into it.
It's moved around,
As you said, the flow starts happening once the ball's rolling, like, because you settle into it, you understand where you want to, because as you said, your brain's calculating, it's doing those decisions as you're going almost, doesn't it? So you're just picking it up as you go. But 100%, like, I think from knowing you as well, like, this is your opportunity and your ability to develop and grow that other people will take a lot from. Like, because like I said, I know from the conversations we've had, you taking this role even upon yourself to be like, actually, do you know what, I'm going to do this, opens other gateways for people to be like, oh, well, actually, yeah, he's doing something that's a bit more out there. Maybe I should try and do something like that. Do you know what I mean? So you are like...
People need to get to know themselves. And I live my life by 5 core values. And the 5th one is choose challenge and adventure. And this is out of my comfort zone. So this is where we grow. It's where we learn. And hopefully it's where we have some fun and
yeah, definitely. And I think
want to try and build something here.
I think, as you said there as well, but this kind of hustle mentality, I think what people need to understand a little bit more, and what I've come to appreciate and understand a bit more as I got older, is that challenging, what did you call it? Challenging you said one of your core values.
I'll choose challenge and adventure.
Choose challenge and adventure. So I think with that, sort of I'm doing the same thing in my own approach, but people are sometimes, I think, do think about stretching themselves too thin with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where it's like, I'll challenge myself doing this and I'll challenge myself doing that. And even though I'm juggling a lot of balls, like my challenge aspect is probably coming into my training at the minute.
Your focus is on your training.
It is on my training. Like I am challenging myself through that. And that is realistically my only real challenge at the minute. Everything else has been sort of, like you said, settled into its flow.
Comfort zone.
That's my comfort zone stuff now. So that's fine. That's just what I'm adapted to and I'm used to it. The challenge is pushing myself on the training side of things to be like, right, I'm going to push the competing side. So for you, this is this. And I think other people need to understand that. It's like, you shouldn't be saying to yourself, oh, if Jack's done a podcast, I'm going to do a podcast whilst trying to maybe that train to push towards being...
I want to compete at this. I want to get the promotion at work. I want to have the kids have the house.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, again, coming back to that word of perspective, you need to sometimes dial that in and be like, what can I actually be focusing on? Have I got the time to put... Realistic goal sets. Because I think that's the thing, as you said, with the hustle mentality, that word's been brandished with a bad brush. Realistic.
Over-popularised.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Because I think people say like, oh, you shouldn't be saying like, what's realistic? Mm-hmm. Because I think there is an aspect of there is realism.
There's realism.
There is realism.
You need to, a proper goal should be time bound, achievable.
Yeah.
And these people are setting unrealistic goals. And don't get me wrong, everyone that achieves something outrageous once started with an audacious goal.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be willing to, what Tony Robbins called burn the boats.
Yes.
If you're gonna take the island, you burn the boats.
Yeah.
So you either take the island or you die.
Yes.
And the people that achieve those goals will regularly burn the boats.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have that approach to too many things at once.
Yeah, it's not like saying like I'm going to burn the boat whilst building a building on the island, whilst trying to get all the kind of supplies brought in.
Exactly.
It's going to be too much.
So you say your focus at the moment's on your own training.
Mm-hmm.
You compete in CrossFit
mm-hmm.
and most recently have qualified for a national competition.
Yep.
At a reasonably high level.
Yep.
I'd say, how's that training going? But talk me through your setback.
Yeah, so my setback was an interesting one. So leading into the competition, which actually, funny enough, this comp was driven by you. So this was a conversation driven by you where you was like, yo, this competition, strength and depth, you're signing up, aren't you? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I haven't really thought too much of it. And
you and I have had conversations endlessly over the years, and your analytical brain was always, I'm preparing to sign up for this, I'm preparing to get ready for that, I'm preparing to that. And I think I just said to you, you just got to do it.
Just got to do it.
You just got to do it.
So this is all totally down to you, by the way.
You're the setback, yeah.
You are the setback. So, so I went for, do you know what? I've been doing this for a while. Let's go for it. So I did it. I was doing my qualifiers. And this is a learning curve that I've actually learned to, again, apply to my own knowledge, my own wisdom, pass on to other people. So I was doing the qualifiers. It was going really well. To be honest, I was actually at the peak of where I felt the best I've ever felt. Like, genuinely, strength was great. Ability to do the gymnastics, if you know CrossFit, but like all the different areas that you need to cover, I was feeling good across the board. And then did one of the workouts. I think it was like the last one, so fourth or whatever it is. And then it was a round of doing deadlifts at 140 kilos, which is still quite heavy.
It is heavy.
Ring muscle ups, double unders. So I did a full round. And again, a little bit of a learning thing with this. As I started it, I felt a few little twinges. And I just thought, yeah, it's normal.
Your sort of senses were going, something's not quite right. But
again, my overdrive brain of
going,
to suffer. Yeah, my overriding brain of going, nah, this is what it's about. You just got to go. You got to commit.
It's tarnished badly with the old school CrossFit mentality. 100%. If it's not hurting, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, this is just part and parcel, surely. So I did it. So I went into the second round of the deadlifts, pulled one, and was like, that didn't feel good. And then went down to the next one and then just got this like instant sharp pain. I was just like, oh, that's not good. Yeah. And then I sort of like leant and I was like, no, I'm definitely done.
Called it there?
Called it there. I was like, no, I'm done. And then probably did the worst thing I could have done at the time, but just being like, I've trained for a long period of time. I've had a few back pumps, shall we say? So it's like that feeling of where
the feeling.
Yeah, that lower back where it feels like it pumps up with blood and you're a bit like limited with movement. So I've had that a few times, and usually from past experience. It's like maybe tightness through the hamstrings or the glutes and everything. So I was like, oh, that's probably just what's happened. I've rushed it a little bit. That's probably what the cause is. So started doing like foam rolling for about an hour. I stretched out for like a good hour or so as well. Went home. I've got one of those kind of like acupuncture mats. I sat on that for ages, like about another hour.
So, like 1 to 10, how much is it hurting?
At that point, it was literally 4 or 5. It was uncomfortable. So I was just like, yeah, this is uncomfortable.
There's a problem, but...
Yeah, don't really know what it is.
I'm in no state of cause for concern.
Yeah, in my head, I was going, oh, I'm going to do this workout again tomorrow. Like, I should be fine. Just got to do all the rehab, make sure my body's good. So that was my process in mind. The next day, that night sleeping, I was like tossing and turning. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable, actually. The next morning, I can only describe, was like horrendous because I just woke up and I was like, shit, I can't move. Like, physically, I had the dog in the room at the time, and I had to try and get up, and I physically couldn't move. It was a horrible experience because I was having to like forcefully like lean myself on the wall, on the bed. I couldn't move my back, and I was like in absolute agony. I went downstairs and I was like, this really doesn't feel right. And I've always said, like, even when I'm training people now, like, the difference sometimes between being uncomfortable and pain. And when you experience pain, you'll know what's uncomfortable. Yeah. So I was in pain at this point, and I was like, yeah, shit, same thing right here. So then I remember messaging my girlfriend at the time and just being like, oh, I think you might need to come home. I'm not sure this is good. Might actually have to go A&E. I'm not sure. Because at that time we knew someone else that had a back injury, and it was quite severe because I think they had like a slip disc that went internal and pressed on a nerve. Yeah. So in my head at that point, I was like, oh shit, maybe I've done that.
Just need to rule that out.
Yeah, I need to rule that out. So I was like, right, I need to go in A&E. So then all I did is I sat at the table, and then I sat myself back, and all I can describe is I got myself into like a bit of a jarred position, and I was like, the pain in my back just kicked in hugely, and I just looked in the mirror, and then all I remember was looking at myself going, oh my God, you look like absolute shit. And if you've ever had this experience of passing out, the blood just rushed from my head. It just left my head. And then I basically just woke up on the floor, and that was from Amy waking me up.
Amy comes in, finds you on the floor.
Amy finds me on the floor. So
what's she thinking at this stage?
She thought I was just laying there because my back was uncomfortable, because I'd said to her my back was in pain. And then the dog wasn't coming near me at the point. So because I literally was sitting on a chair here, and I ended up on the floor on the other side. So she was just like, yeah, what are you doing? Like, why are you laying on the floor? And then I was like, what do you mean I'm on the floor? I just woke up and I was like, I was discombobulated. I was just like, where am I? What's happened? Sort of thing. And then it sort of was like, oh shit, I've passed out here. Fuck, this isn't good. So then I sat on the chair again. And at that point, I think my body just went into a bit of a panic attack anyway. So I just like had all the sweats, couldn't breathe properly. So cut that sort of long story short, then got rushed to hospital because I physically couldn't move at this point, and then just, basically got diagnosed with having like a herniated prolapse disc. And I was just like, oh, yeah, I really fucked that up, didn't I?
What's your first thought there?
That was like, to be honest, it was a real eye-opener to be like, one, to understand that you actually can be quite delicate. Appreciation. This is an interesting one because it's one of those, like, like when people used to say, you should appreciate your school years because they're like some of your best years. And when you're in it, you don't realise it.
You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Exactly. That is the same thing as your back. It genuinely is. And it's one of those, again, if you've never actually fully experienced a real back problem, you probably don't appreciate when someone says to you like, oh, my back's sore, I can't do this and I can't do that. Because I used to think that. I'd be like, oh, you're just being lazy sort of thing. But if you actually do experience that genuine back pain and not being able to like just physically lean yourself forwards, that's scary. Like, to be fair, like if I was to own it all out, it is a scary feeling because you think, wow, like what could happen here? Like, what's the long-term effects from something that's happened here? So yeah, like being up the hospital and everything, I was just like, oh yeah, this is a scary place to be at. I don't really want to be like this again.
So they've delivered the news. In your mind, is strength and depth out the window?
At that point, I'm like, yeah, like this, I don't know how long this is going to take. Like, this could be a serious problem. I wasn't even thinking about them. I was just like, I've got to do everything I can to get, almost like ease this pain, realistically. And then I think weirdly, like a few days sort of went by and everything, and I was like, right, I spoke to like a few people, being fortunate to have people like John that owns like Eighth Element, yeah. Speaking to him and allowing like that kind of, what should I be doing here? because in your head, you're sometimes like, I should be resting, recovering and sort of things like that. And then just speaking to people that have got a bit of it, like expertise, like it is a bad injury, but it could be worse. And like, even in the moments of a few days passing, I was like, right, I'm not getting the same experience of shooting pain. So I'm clearly being okay. I'm recovering in some aspects. So it was just like, right, everything I can focus on now to get better is the goal, basically. So stretching, mobilizing. John was explaining to me how to do things like nerve flossing and all that sort of stuff. And what I realized was like, you genuinely have to take appreciation and care of yourself in those moments. So like, if you do experience problems and pains, sometimes the worst thing to do is just completely sack it off.
Yep.
And just be like, well, that's me screwed.
Yeah, defeatist, victim mentality.
Yes, exactly. Be like, well, I'm not going to do that again. It's like the back injury at that moment in time was an accumulation of many things. I think it's one of those, it could have happened doing that workout, it's one of those things that people will...
Just so happens to be bad press for deadlifts.
Do you know what? Yeah, this is it. Like, I was one that would say, like, you know, back in the day, like, oh, your CrossFit's a bit stupid because you're doing all this and you're doing all that, throwing all these different movements in that, like, can really fuck people up. And yes, that can be true to a degree depending on your level and ability, but I've trained a lot. I'm competent at the movements I was doing. That wasn't necessarily the problem. So again, like, looking back on it, this is when I know that I need to be better at managing myself, and other people should take this approach themselves, that if you've got that kind of mindset of being like, oh, I must do this and I've got to do it this day. Because I remember being like, the window of the qualifiers was quite short. Mm-hmm. So in my head, I was like, well, I've only got this day to practice it, see what I can do. And I've got one more day to register a score.
To do it and submit your score.
Exactly. So in my head, I was like, I have to do it here. And like you said, when that sort of thought goes into my head, it's quite hard to shake it out. Now, was it the best decision? No, because the weekend before, it had been when I'd done my 2 12-hour night shifts. So I was very sleep deprived. Preparation was very low. Like I said, I've kind of rushed it on that day. And then there would have been a few things. I'd done heavy workouts, obviously, in the lead up to that. So throwing all these things into the barrel, there's a few reasons as to why that could have happened and when it happened. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't actually doing that movement or that thing that caused it.
That's just what manifested it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're now dealing with the fact that you think strength and depth's possibly out the window. You mm-hmm. take the opportunity to focus on where you are and rehab. Mm-hmm. And you're starting rehab thinking strength and depth's still out the window?
Yeah, so I was like, I've got Turf Games, as we know, we've got that like as another competition that's coming up in like a week's time. Mm-hmm. So I had my main focus, which was, I think, the hardest mentality or the mental setback was, I kind of prepared myself really thinking that a lot of what I wanted to do was for this summer.
Okay.
I like kind of put all my eggs in my basket. This was my moment. All my eggs are in this basket of thinking, I'm preparing for the summer. Like, I'd done a few little events and comps with like the High Rocks and that in the lead up during the winter period. But I didn't really focus too much on anything else. It was like, actually, I'm going to go for these. And I'm going to do the European Championships as well as qualifiers. So they were all things that I knew were happening in the summer period. So yeah, when this had happened, I was like, well, this could be this whole year, basically. I could be out for like 3-6 months. I don't actually know. So I was like, yeah, this is done. But then I don't think, in my head, I thought that was done. But then the process of fixing the back was bigger. So that was all kind of like pushed aside anyway.
You have this setback and you've got to say, stop, mm-hmm. pause, be where your feet are.
Yep.
Focus on what really matters.
Yes.
Not what matters most to me right now.
Yep.
What matters most to me overall, which
exactly.
is health, being able to compete next summer,
yep.
if required.
Yep.
And going step by step.
Yep.
Back to basics, working through the boring work,
mm-hmm. the
unsexy stuff,
yep.
and you know the non-exhilarating stuff.
100%, because I think that was the thing. If I was to think, oh well, that's everything that I'm working towards now is gone for this summer, I maybe would have pushed back the whole rehab stuff, because I'm thinking to myself, well, these aren't going to be possible now. So what's the point? Yeah, what's the point in starting this now? Like, I'm not. So that was all pushed aside, but it wasn't that I was then focusing on that, because like you said, it was just focusing on the here and now and going, well, the most important thing is getting this sorted so I am not experiencing this problem right now. Everything else doesn't really matter.
I'll rebuild myself brick by brick.
Exactly that. Like, it's that saying of like, every breakdown leads to a breakthrough. And I think that was it for me. It was just like, right, you've had that breakdown moment. What do you need to do to fix that and get yourself, as you said, get that ball rolling again? So I think it was just focusing on the rehab work, getting myself into a position where I just wasn't even realistically experiencing pain. I didn't want to experience pain. Like no one, which is, does baffle me when people have problems that they just ignore and leave. Because I think, why would you ever want to let that be a lingering issue?
Right. Yeah. Like these people that constantly have pain from their sedentary lifestyles.
Yeah.
And just accept that that's the hand they're dealt.
Yeah.
When they could be working with movement specialists, they could be taking simple actions like walking 10,000 steps every day, like attending Pilates classes, like, you know, buying there's mobility apps, there's books, there's
thousands of resources, isn't there? And that, in a career that I do with engineering, it's hugely seeable. So like we've got so many guys that get signed off with knee problems, back pains, and like as you said, they just accept it. They're just like, oh yeah, I can't do that because my knees hurt and my back hurts. You see them getting further and further overweight, and like nothing to address the problem. It's just, oh well, the pain hurts, so I'm not going to go and do this job, or you know, it's not to say it's a bit of a cop out, because I'm sure there is pain and experiencing certain pains. I'm sure people do go, I don't want to. They run away from it.
People do experience pains, you know, like you look at the Paralympians. They're not competing pain-free.
Yeah.
They're competing in severe pain.
Yep.
And, okay, they're the elite.
Yep.
They are the outliers. Well, you know, you only have to attend the London Marathon to see people competing with no knee cartilage, in wheelchairs, wearing spacesuits. You know, you haven't got to be injured.
Yeah.
You know, you can just be, you know, carrying your friend in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
It's still going to hurt.
I think this goes back to that other thing of what we said before, like there will always be someone else worse off than you. So actually sometimes you just have to take that little bit of appreciation to go, yeah, this is bad, but I've got every right within myself to make it better. And I think that was the thing. As soon as I knew that, okay, it's an injury. It's
You've
a bad
accepted
injury.
it.
I've accepted it. It was my own fault. There was a lot of things I could have prevented that happening, or it might have happened now. Do you know what I mean? It could have been one of those things. They always explain.
Worse.
Yeah, I would have been closer to things, and then that would have been a real setback. But it's like they always say, things like your spine is like a loaded spring. Sometimes it can take the smallest of movements, whether it's puffing a pillow to doing your bed sheets, that could make it go. You just sometimes don't know. It can happen. So yeah, I think that was the focus at that point. And then I think for me, doing that, applying myself to really focus on getting myself better, just like anything, if there's a problem, focus a lot of your attention onto it, and the recovery process or the fixing process will be a lot quicker than you think.
Your recovery became your number one focus.
That was the number one focus. And then within a couple of weeks, to be honest, I was so fortunate. I started to think to myself, and again, this is me understanding myself, my body as a person that's trained and done sports or done something for a lot of years now. I remember getting to a point of going, I think I'm okay at doing some things here. Like for me, I was like, well, it's certain positions that hurt, like it's leaning forwards, for example. So I was like, well, what's to stop me just getting on the bike? I can cycle for 45 minutes to an hour. That'll get it'll get my legs moving, gets the blood flowing. I'm starting something. I'm getting the ball rolling in some way, so I'm okay with that. And then it led to, okay, I'm okay on the bike. Well, let's try this exercise now. And actually, I can do some of these movements if I'm in a like strict standing position, because I'm not bending forwards, I'm not lifting up. So I was like, well, okay, well, let's involve these into my training as well now. So I had my rehab work, and then I started to slowly build in these little blicks of going, I can do this, and I can do this.
You're applying the same principle to a different problem, which is I have a goal, that's to get better.
Yep.
And I'm going to take it, you know, step by step by step, small attainable goal at a time.
Yep.
Can I cycle today? Yes,
yep.
no. Can I, you know, lift shoulder press strict today?
Yep.
Yes, no. And whether it's rehab, whether it's trying to cut down your 5K time, whether it's building a house, whatever it is you want to do, a mentor of mine said to me, it's like eating an elephant. There's only one way to do it, one bite at a time.
Yep. Yeah.
Because if you sit there and think, I've got to eat this whole elephant.
Yeah.
You know, you'll just forever think about ways to
put it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the task is too big. how am I going to get all of that in?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And I think, that's definitely the process that you need to take in these things. Is like day by, like we should know it all by now. We hear a lot of this stuff through other people that provide this sort of information, but it's just that step-by-step process of going, can I do this? Yep. Can I work myself towards this next goal? Or it's just a lot of things. It is just trial and error, isn't it? It's just like, are you actually physically able to do something? And this could be for whatever it is you're doing, sport related. You just take those little snippets here and there and just think, okay, the goal isn't to focus on what I'm doing in a week or 2 weeks time. It's just, what can I do in this hour?
What can I control? What are the controllables I can control today?
Yeah, definitely.
So your rehab's going well?
Yep.
You're going to strength in depth?
Looks like it at the minute. So
Excellent.
so taking that sort of whole kind of picture, like where I've been really fortunate is when the injury occurred, it was only about 9 weeks ago now. So recovery wise, I think I've surpassed a lot of expectations.
But it is still early.
It's still early to know.
That's in your mind.
So that's in my mind. I have to be, because again, like I still have things I need to think about. I'm not an elite I'm not an elite athlete. I'm not someone that needs to, this is my livelihood. So I have to obviously take all the considerations of like, I still have a career. I still have to keep the roof over my head. I still have to want to continue like coaching stuff. So I don't want to do something where I just completely put myself out. So I think that was the thing. So the injury happened, started the rehab work, started implementing little bits here and there. And then as that process went, I just kept adding a little bit more. And don't get me wrong, like even during that whole time, there was moments of it still sucked. Like, and I would have those good days and those bad days, like mentally. Physically, it would always be there, but I'd still have those real mental breakdown days where I'd do something and then I'd be like, it would just flare the back up because it's probably expected, maybe pushing a little bit too more. I mean, I remember the first time I was just trying to pick up the bar again for a deadlift at 40 kilos and it flared it. And then it was just like painful again. Feel like the little bit of movement that I'd gained went all the way back. And I was just like, where's this going to end? Sort of like how, that kind of looking to that finish line of going, like, what is this actually going to be? But again, just let the process continue out. The following week, I was like, oh, that 40 is fine now. It was up to like a 60 lifting the bar off the floor. And I went, okay, so you've seen the improvement here.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah, and it was, sometimes you've got to commit to something to see and to give yourself that analysis. So like it did suck. I had those bad mental days where I'm like, oh, this is shit. What am I going to do? Like, how's it actually going to get better? Do I maybe need to stop all this training and just whatever? But, brush that aside.
So how does Jordan McCann deal with the shit mental days? Because, you're an overthinker like me.
Yep.
So when you get into a tailspin, it can be hard to fight against it and bring yourself back to level if you're anything like me.
Yep.
So how do you deal with those down days?
Because I think you have to.
We're guys that exercise to control our minds and keep our mental health in good check. When that's taken away from you, how do you deal with that?
I think there's a couple of things, isn't it? It's one, just keep doing the thing. Really benefits me, I think, sometimes. Like, just keep trying.
Right.
Like, it can be a bad day.
Remind yourself of the bigger goal.
Yeah, just keep trying. Just because that one thing didn't really work or it felt like another setback, you got to keep trying. They always say, there's always humps in the road. There's obviously there's obstacles on the road. We all understand that. But it is just going like, you just need to keep trying. Like, has it been significant enough to make you actually stop? And when it hasn't been, you keep that going. And again, I think it comes back all the way full circle to that perspective thing where I go, yep, it sucks, but there's always been someone in a worse off position than you. Like, you have the freedom of still being able to move and do this level of training. So you have a luxury. Some people don't have that luxury. You've got to just keep sticking with it. And I think that's what then kept the day by day rolling over, the week by week, and just, I think you just, with that little bit of time, little bit of experience, bit of age, you start to appreciate, like, there will always be those little kind of bad moments, bad days. And I think for myself, it would always be like, well, how can you, from what's happened, is there anything that you can do to prevent that maybe happening again the next day? So from an injury point of view. It was
learning from your mistakes.
Learning from your mistakes. So like looking at what had happened to cause a bad training day or a bad flare up of the injury and going, okay, well, did you do enough stretching really today? Did you mobilise enough?
Right. This is where your overthinking plays to a strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you start to think, instead of just going like, oh, that was shit, I'm going to leave that there. So it's like, okay, did you actually do that? Did you actually do enough of this? Did you do the rehab bit at the start of the workout and training and all that sort of stuff? Like, are you actually self-analysing yourself? Probably is the way of describing it. And I think that's probably, as you said, like it's a curse to a benefit, because I think doing that genuinely propelled me forwards as I kept going, because I think like I said, being that injury being like 9 weeks ago occurring, so being that person that couldn't move, was literally frozen, passing out on the floor, being taken to hospital, to then doing all these things and then being like getting to about 4 weeks out, so a month. So I'd been about a month from the injury, being like, I'm back lifting again. Like, although in your head a month you think's not a huge amount of time, it doesn't sound like a lot of time. In the process, it felt like a long time. But also when I analysed myself, I was like, wow, within a month, I'm actually back.
Taking the wins.
I'm lifting here. Like, these little days when I was having those bad moments, those bad experiences and stuff like that, I was like, just continuously doing something each day that rolled into a week, that rolled into another week. And then I was at a point where I'm like, oh, wow, actually, yeah, hang on a second. A month into herniating my disc, I'm back lifting again. And yes, it's not comfortable, but I'm doing it. You know, it's not, I'm not able to physically do it anymore. And I think that's what then, you know, that's the little things that, like you said, the little wins that then builds a little bit of confidence, that then goes, okay, well, maybe this goal isn't out of reach actually. Because if you've been able to make this progress within a month, you've still got like another month, 5 weeks or whatever to the next thing. So if this is your recovery to this position, or if you've gone from being here and this is where you are currently, well, where could you be in another month or another 6 weeks if you have the same trajectory of recovery? So
how far out are you from strength and depth now?
So it's 2 weeks out. And I think that was, so the other little win that I had was, again, within this whole process, it's been quite mad to think that going from that, doing my little recovery process, I had signed up for the European Champs, which I said was another goal within the summer period. So I did the qualifiers for that. Again, the very first workout, although it wasn't the same level of weight, the first workout was a deadlift. Okay.
Is that in your head?
Yeah, 100%. It was a sprint workout, calorie row, burpees and deadlifts, I think it was. But it was still a deadlift, so touching and going. And I was like, oh, you know, like...
The previous setbacks now living rent-free in your head going into this one.
This is 8 weeks ago, doing this same movement, I popped my back, like, and couldn't move. And here I am going, do you know what? Let's go. Like,
trying to face your tormentor.
Let's just see. Like, it's one of those where there's a really good analogy that Will Smith does, if anyone's listened to it. It's about him, like, talking about skydiving. And this is something I'd never actually do, to be fair. However, the thought of what he talks about in the lead up to it, like how it, you know, you're building it up, you're building that fear, that kind of, what could happen with this and what's it going to feel like, and And he says that moment you kind of just get over the ledge and you're falling, it's like euphoria. You're just like,
you're free.
It's fine. And I think that was the thing for me. It was just like, it's just that mental thing of doing the first couple of reps and going, you know how you feel, you're fine. And you just been like, okay, this is cool. Like, this feels fine. Like, it's not what I want it to feel like. I'm not where I once was prior to this, but this feels okay. Like, I'm cool here. Like, so 8 weeks, I've gone from herniating a disc, having to recover, build back into training, to then doing an online qualifier again, and then also qualifying from it. So I was like, well, this is a big win. Like, in its own way, I was like, okay, well, all the work you've done prior to even doing the first set of qualifiers, you realise what you've put the time and work into has benefited you further in the long run. Because although I'm not feeling like how I should feel, I'm still being overridden by the work that led the whole work. It's an accumulation
of your mindset that's got you to this point.
Yeah.
And being able to come back and face the same thing that gave you the setback, or at least presented you the setback.
Yep.
Facing it head on and overcoming it must be the biggest mental win you could take from it.
Yeah, because then that's what you sort of say to yourself.
It's freeing, like
it's
the
freeing.
skydive.
It is it's a freeing feeling because you're like,
I'm over the edge, I'm falling.
I'm okay.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah, and then that almost was like I said, that breakdown leads to breakthrough, and that where I kind of said to myself, like, okay, maybe you should credit yourself a little bit more than what you should think, because I can't think of many people in their own right, and I don't mean to say this as blowing my own trumpet, but that can go through a position of herniating a disc, continuing like working and stuff, to rehabbing, retraining, going into new qualifiers, and actually coming out the other end of it fully qualifying. And that was the other thing that was interesting with the injury when it occurred with the strength and depth one, was I remember just logging that score of what I got anyway, because I was just like, I'll just put it out there. And even doing that, the work that I'd done in the 3 events prior to that was still enough for me to qualify. So even though I kind of flunked that last workout and being injured, there was enough work done before that still qualified me.
Whereas the victim might have said,
just left it.
Just screw it.
Yeah, just like, and I always think of that in like, you've seen that in simple as, it sits in my head. I don't know why it sits in my head, but do you watch the Great British Bake Off?
No.
Oh, there you go. Great program. But there was a thing in that's just like, I've always known that you should just don't give that defeatist mindset. But it was there was one of the episodes on that, and there was a guy that had done this kind of, it's like a baked Alaskan, is it called? It's like an ice cream cake thing, whatever it is. And he basically put it in the freezer because that's what you had to do to set it. Someone took it out, forgot to put it back in, and it just went to mush. Just bleh. So he just was like, fuck this, threw it in the bin. And then basically, even on live TV, they were like, this is a competition. Why have you just thrown it away? Like, you could have presented something. We could have turned around and gone, that still tastes good. Yeah, the presentation might have been gone, but it still tastes good. We can see the work that went into it. So you would have had something that might have been still better than someone else that over the 2 days of competing or whatever they do on that, like that would have been enough to have got you through. And that's always kind of still stuck in my head. So that was why I think in my head, I went, well, yeah, just log the score anyway, because you never know. And then likelihood, it was like, that was enough to still go, you qualify. Because if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have been in a position to have been able to do the live.
But now you get to go to the show.
Now I get to go to the show still.
Good. Well, best of luck with that. I'll be up to come and see it for a little bit. Before we sort of finish up, I want to throw some like quicker questions at you, just some little left of field ones. Yeah. So
jab hook.
What is the advice that you've received that stuck with you to this day? The most poignant piece of advice?
Do you know what? I've always thought about this because I've heard it on other people's like audiobooks and podcasts and stuff like that. And it's always been something that I've thought about, and I've realised I actually don't have one bit of advice that I've ever been told that I think to myself that I apply and I want to give back to people almost. And I think that's why I try and think of myself being that person.
Right.
And give that kind of, like to be a coach, like to try and advise, try and help. Because although I've had really good people mentoring me along the ways, there's never been something that's fully stuck with me to go like, oh, that was great advice. Do you know what I mean? It's always just been, I think, work hard. Like if you want to achieve something, you just got to keep going. You just got to keep pursuing it. And I think that's what's kind of always that's probably been the thing that's just rubbed off on me. It's not that I've ever been told specifically, like, trust me, if you stick to these principles, this will be the outcome. And I think that's something that like I would want to be better now at trying to give to someone else, so that hopefully one day I could be the person that tells someone something that they'll go, oh yeah, I remember when I remember he told me that, and that's stuck with me. Like I said, I think there's been a few sayings that I've listened to that have stuck with me, and they're the ones that I'd probably credit it, like every breakdown leads to breakthrough. The comeback will be greater than the setback. They're the sort of things that sit in my head, I guess. But it's not been something that's been personally told to me.
It's something you learned along the way.
Something that I've learned along the way, and they're the things I try to encourage to other people now. So
good. And coaching is the ultimate vehicle for delivering that message.
Yeah, definitely.
What are you working on that you're excited about?
Probably myself, realistically, like continuing the rebuild just from the injury, and then just sort of giving this whole competing side of things a good whack, really. Trying to work towards what level of competitions I can reach, how I can perform in those levels of competition, and trying to see the best outcome that I can get from it. I think that's what I've come to realise, that is almost where my full focus is right now, because it's probably a good couple of years that it's going to take to continue that process, but it's something that at this point in time I can invest into, and beyond a couple of years it's probably going to diminish. So that should be the here and now to focus on.
Now's the time.
Now is the time. Yeah, go all in, because you're probably not going to be in this position again, because unfortunately, like, time is a factor.
Yep.
And that's why I think, this is where I'm sort of throwing the whole, what do they say, like throwing the whole tray at it, basically.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's time to burn the boats, mate.
Maybe it's the time to burn the boats and just, that's it, being all in, being stuck on that island.
Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's been fun.
It's been a great conversation. You made it very easy for me for the first one.
I'm glad, mate. You made it easy to give everything that's been stuck in my head for a while.
I've had fun. I hope you have.
Yeah, it's been great, mate.
And I wish you all the best for
Thank
Strength
you.
in Depth.
I know you're going to be there supporting.
I have no doubt that you will work to keep delivering on those goals, working on yourself. And, one from me is just, please don't stop pouring what you're pouring into coaching, because it's an act of service that helps so many people. Mm-hmm. And you think when people go to the gym, most of them are going there for the best hour of their day.
Yeah.
And giving people that time, attention, and positive feedback, and fair feedback when required, helps inspire the growth mindset in them, and helps them work on being their best.
Yep.
And the self that they want to be.
Yep, definitely.
So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
And please keep it going. But
no, that's what I think. For my last thing, I guess, would be something for you to give back to everyone else. Is just like, you've asked me what's the best bit of advice I've received. I'd like to know what's just led you to be here at this point now as well.
I think someone once said to me, a coach, that too many people die with their best music still inside them.
Right.
And that makes me want to explore every avenue that I can to make sure that I have the impact I want to have in my life, the impact I want to have in my marriage, and to help as many people as I can to ensure that, that I live my best and most authentic life. I'm not here to, I want to change the world.
Yeah.
No, I'm here to make sure that I enjoy my time in this world.
Yep.
And that others do as well.
Yeah, and you're filling it with what you want to do with it then.
Enriching experiences.
Yeah. I think that's a real good message to almost give back as well. As you said there, it's not like necessarily focusing on worrying about changing the world, because that's very much within the hustle mindset now, isn't it? That you should be this big picture that you're trying to do and trying to reach
all these millennials that I'm here to change the world. Well, you need to get in a time machine and invent Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, that is going to be very difficult to be that next changing factor. So I think, as you said, like, just trying to do that one thing that sometimes impacts the people closest to you can be a real progressive starting stone, can't it? Because it can lead wherever it can lead to. But if you're impacting the people that are around you and closest to you,
the people that matter most
to you, that's a good thing to eventually sign off with, isn't it? Like, rather than worrying about what does the internet think and what does the grand masses, like,
what
how
do
much
people
can
who
I
matter
reach?
To me think?
Yeah.
What do I think of myself?
Yeah. So that's a solid bit of advice, I think, to give to other people.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We did it.
It's been a pleasure. We did it. The first one.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. Mate.